Hello, everybody. Welcome to Anderson Ranch and our summer faculty lecture series. My name is Lindsay Yeager, and I'm the studio coordinator of painting, drawing, and printmaking. Before we begin, please take a moment to silence your cell phones. I want to start by recognizing that the Anderson Ranch campus resides on the historic tribal lands of the Ute people who called this area home for over 800 years. In honor of this legacy, we focus on building an inclusive community here, maintaining this as a place for inspiration and creativity in the center of the Rocky Mountains. I'd like to remind everybody to attend the ranch-wide orientation right here in Schimmer Meeting Hall tomorrow morning at 8:45. So tonight's program will consist of 2 faculty lectures followed by a Q&A. First, I'd like to introduce Ed Kashi. My God, I forgot to pull up the bio on my phone, you guys. Okay, I forgot, I have a different copy. Ed Kashi is a prolific photojournalist, filmmaker, speaker, and educator. A member of VII Photo Agency, Kashi has produced 14 books and his work has been published and exhibited worldwide. And he's teaching in the Advanced Mentored Studies program, visual storytelling and visual storytelling and documentary projects. Please join me in welcoming Ed Kashi.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for that. So I'm going to try to fit 45 years into 20 minutes, so wish me luck here. Last year, okay, don't want to go to sleep. Last year, the Briscoe Center for American History, housed at University of Texas at Austin, acquired my archives, which included original film, prints, books, ephemera, and my personal journals, mostly to my wife, Julie, who's sitting in the front row there, over a 20-year period. So in conjunction with that acquisition, they're publishing a book this October, which is a sort of career retrospective. So a period in time, looking back while moving forward, has over 200 images from 1977 to 2022, representing the first 45 years of my career, documenting many of the social and geopolitical issues that defined that time. The book also contains journal entries and that provide a personal and intimate view into my process, my experiences. I really feel that particularly photojournalism is a very lonely, very difficult profession, particularly the kind of work I do. And, for example, keeping the journals and writing to Julie every night was a way of feeling connected. And so there are some of those entries in the book. This book marks a pivotal moment in my career, encapsulating a significant chapter of my life and serving as a lasting testament to my life's work thus far. I'm profoundly grateful for the opportunity to create this work, to experience so much of the world, and for the unwavering support of the Briscoe Center, which has provided me with this enduring platform and showcase. So the title is meant to reflect, as I was putting this work together last year, sort of feverishly over a period of months, once I knew this book was coming out, and for the last few years, I've been going through my archives, the physical archives, as well as the digital archives, preparing it to be shipped. I think it was 127 banker boxes to Austin. It's a time of immense and intense reflection, because my work is my life, apart from my wife and our 2 children. And so, anyway, this is meant to stand as a document also for future generations and storytellers. So I put this book together chronologically and to sort of show my trajectory from a photo student in the 1970s to becoming a magazine photographer. I worked a lot with National Geographic magazine, among other publications. So some of the early work, this is when I was a photo student in London, 19 years old. This was a very historic fireman's protest. This is in Colombia. I was very naive 23-year-old, not knowing what I was doing. I was actually later arrested by these guys, and they were just laughing because they could see how nervous and ridiculous I was, and they let me go. After I graduated, I'm from New York. After I graduated from Syracuse University's Newhouse School of Public Communications, I moved out to San Francisco. And then really the first major documentary project I worked on, and I work on projects for years. So I spent 3 years looking at the Protestant community of Northern Ireland. And just the way I've structured the book is that every sort of project or story has this sort of intro spread to give an explanation. Because this book is really meant to be a sort of a document, and as well as, of course, showcasing my work. And so for me, this was my first attempt at really creating something that was in depth. It was as much anthropological as it was, journalistic. And I was intrigued once I went to Northern Ireland in 1988 with this one community, the Protestant community. A quarter of all United States presidents hail from Protestant Ulster stock. And as I got more into this project, I started to come to understand, in a way, it was a template for how I would work the rest of my career. Looking at the rituals, looking at significant events, the daily life. One of the things I did was I spent months with, this is Brian on the right, with his girlfriend, who was 18. At that point, the Troubles, as they were called, was 20 years old. So I thought it would be really interesting to see what was it like to be an 18-year-old where all they knew was conflict, and intimate conflict. Literally, he would sleep with weapons because literally across the street was the Catholic community. One of the stories I worked on after the Berlin Wall fell down, I went with a journalist to what was then Czechoslovakia, East Germany, and Poland to sort of get an idea of, when regimes fall or these kinds of things happen, there's this period where there's like a vacuum of authority. And I was intrigued by this sort of cabaret lifestyle that had come out of Nazi Germany in the 1930s, which influenced, Madonna and so much of even American and Western culture. And so we were working both in the East and the West, sort of looking at nightlife and culture in the reunified Berlin. So you have the gay bars and these what they would call then transvestite shows, but raves. And this is on the film studios, in Potsdam, very famous film studio, where Fritz Lang made Metropolis. And this was just a prop guy walking. I did not set this up. I call these moments knee shakers. It's like, don't screw it up. The photo gods have given you something, right? Like focus and all that. So this is an example of sort of the journal entries that are sprinkled throughout the book. And I'm not going to, you don't need to read this, but just to give you an idea of the sort of structure. And then the first project I worked on with National Geographic magazine is a story that I proposed to them, looking at the Kurdish people. And this is an idea that came to me out of working in Northern Ireland. I was at a cafe in Derry one day, and I met a very famous British painter who was married to a Turkish Kurdish woman. She told me about the Kurds. As an American, I had never heard of them. And so when I heard that the Kurds are the largest ethnic group in the world without a nation of their own, I was hooked. And so I wrote a proposal, and thankfully Nat Geo accepted it, and it sent me to 8 countries over a 26-week period. The other thing it did is my parents are from Baghdad, but I grew up as an American kid. Thankfully my dad immigrated in the 1940s to New York, where I was born. But going to document the plight of the Kurdish people, this is after the first Gulf War, so they had suffered from a 15-year genocidal campaign by Saddam Hussein. Over 4,000 towns and villages in northern Iraq had been destroyed. And when they were able to return after the first Gulf War, this is what most of the Kurdish people returned to: absolute rubble. I also went, on the bottom right, to Berlin. There's maybe probably 1 or 2 million Kurds in Germany alone as part of the diaspora. On the bottom left is a American soldier, I guess trying to win hearts and minds. I think he looks more perplexed than they do. And I've continued to work to do work on the Kurdish people. In 2005, I went back and proposed another story to National Geographic to look at northern Iraq, which, after the American invasion in 2003, was probably the safest and most peaceful part of Iraq, and continues to be so to today. This is in the Crimea. It was from another story I did with National Geographic. And again, some of these scenes are so emotional. My dad died when I was 10. I never got to say goodbye to him. And then you're in these situations where you see a family grieving over their loved one. So this is a Muslim ritual where they're washing, the imam and is washing the body before burial. And then this was the first project that Julie Winoker, who we were not married at that point, but we've been together over 30 years. But she's a writer and a filmmaker, and this is the first project we ever worked on together. The City of the Dead in Cairo. This is a functioning cemetery on the northern edge of Cairo, where at that point in 1993, something like hundreds of thousands of people were living in it. So we thought it was a really novel and interesting look at overpopulation and, kind of this sort of, I don't want to say strange, but this way that this very ancient and important Islamic cemetery was inhabited by, small factories. This is a glass blowing factory. What were once tombs? They have weddings. It was pretty incredible. And again, one of the amazing things about doing this work is the privilege of getting to witness and learn and see how the world works, at least to some degree, which is what makes this moment so confusing, but that's another subject. This was another story I worked in. This was probably the only time I went out in the field with an idea that I got there and I realized I couldn't do it. It's 1994. I decided I wanted to go to Vietnam to look at the burgeoning youth culture. And once I got there, it was just like I could not connect. I couldn't figure out what to do. But then I noticed, sometimes it's good to be naive. Like the whole city is on motorbikes and bicycles. So I spent the next 2 weeks on the back of a motorcycle making pictures. And, so the young girl doing her homework on the way to school on her dad's back, just to see, people bringing produce to market, so forth and so on. I spent like 2 weeks doing that. There's another journal entry. This is when our son was, 5 months old, and I was in Syria working. So for a long period of time, I worked a lot in the Middle East. There was a period of time for National Geographic where I seemed to be like their Middle East guy. This is in Syria in 2008, before the Civil War. This is in Syria in 1995, a shepherd. This is in Beirut, along the beaches in Beirut. These are Palestinian jockeys. I don't know why, but it seemed like the Palestinian folks were the ones who sort of took care of the horses and were the jockeys. Horse racing and gambling is a big thing in the Middle East. I also worked for a 3-year period on a personal project looking at Messianic Jewish settlers in the West Bank. This is an ancient spring that would have, in the past be controlled by Palestinians, and now Jewish settlers control it. Very different time. I probably couldn't do that work now. This is in Gaza. Just various images from around. It's bottom left is in Iraq after the war or during the war. This is in Beirut in the bottom right. And this is during the American invasion, and this was one of Saddam's palaces that the U.S. Army took over. So these are U.S. soldiers frolicking in the pool while the war is going on. It was absolutely surreal. This is another journal entry when I was working in Iraq, and this was one of the closest times I've come to actually being killed or injured during war. That's my fixer, and an hour later after we got to the hotel, he quit. This was really harrowing in Pakistan. I worked on a big story for the Geographic looking at Pakistan. This is in 1998, and one of the issues I wanted to deal with was this terrible issue of, mostly brides being burned. And so this woman, her husband had thrown acid on her face. And it had taken weeks for me to get permission in the one hospital in Lahore where I knew that they treated women who had suffered this fate, and worked, talked with her family and finally got permission. Sometimes these things, it's weird. It feels like a victory in some perverse way, but this is, I feel this is an important issue to bring to light. And then for almost 8 years, Julie and I worked on a large project looking at aging. After years of working abroad, I decided I need to turn my camera on my own culture, on my own country. And as I looked at like what would be one of the great themes of my lifetime, you know, in the grand tradition of documentary photography from the Farm Security Administration photographers that covered the Dust Bowl 1930s to, it's endless, you know, Charles Moore and civil rights and Donna Ferrato and domestic violence. There's such a great tradition that continues to today of photographers deciding on their own to go out and pick an issue and spend years documenting it. And ultimately, this work made it into the Library of Congress a couple of years ago. So I went to 25 of the 50 states over this period of time. And during that period, Julie went from being a writer to a filmmaker. We just covered a wide range of stories that we sort of made into sort of mini photo essays along the way so we could publish them in magazines around the world along the way, but knowing in the end we'd have this huge archive of material to make a book, a documentary film, website, so forth and so on. So we don't have time to get into every detail, but this is probably one of the most powerful, moving stories. This is in rural West Virginia. That's Warren and Arden. Arden on the left is 90, Warren 76. They met at a Walmart. Warren befriended the elder man, and when he found out that his wife, who was also 90, was sick, he moved into their home, lived with them, and took care of them. And this is the moment where Maxine, and they had been married 70 years, is passing away. And then after working on that, Julie's father, who was only our one remaining parent, who was living in New Jersey, where she's from, we were in San Francisco, we realized that he was beginning to show signs of dementia and Lewy body's disease, so we moved our family to New Jersey to take care of him, and then ended up, so this is the first time, and in a way only time really, we've turned the camera on ourselves. Sorry, there's a lot of pivots here. I don't know how we're doing on time, so tell me when I need to stop. So another project that I decided, again, this was my next personal project, was looking at the impact of oil exploitation in Nigeria, in the Niger Delta, which is in the southern Christian part of this vast and incredibly important country in Africa. 1 in 5 Africans is Nigerian. 1 in 10 black people in the world is from Nigeria. The Nigerians are powerful people, smart people, but they have not reaped the benefits, the people have not reaped the benefits of oil. Easily more than $1 trillion of wealth has been generated. I always say when I'm teaching folks, you never know where opportunity will come from. Well, this fell into my lap because my son played baseball, and it just so happened that one of the other baseball parents in San Francisco was Professor Michael Watts at Berkeley, who was a world-famous geographer who was a world expert on the Niger Delta. And as we were talking in the stands, one thing led to another. And he was like, hey, mate, you want to come to Nigeria with me? And I was like, yeah. And I went for 3 weeks with him. And then after that, it was like, I need to continue this project. It was one of the grossest examples of economic inequity, just that so much wealth has been generated, and most of the people are living literally on $1 or $2 a day, no running water, no electricity, no paved roads, on and on and on. You know, and many of the people are just like butted up against the oil works. It's really inexcusable. And we take, I think the United States takes something like 40% of Nigerian energy. So we're burning Nigerian oil to have this electricity on some level. So this is another project. It's an example where I love India. I wanted to go to India, and I was researching, and I found out about this project, the Golden Quadrilateral Highway. It was the largest infrastructure project in India up to that point, where they're basically creating like this massive, you know, I don't know, was it 5,000-mile roadway to modernize India. So I proposed it to the Geographic as an idea of a metaphor for how India was modernizing, but also some of the many problems that they're facing as well. This is just outside of Mumbai. This is literally that's sewage. It's literally from the shanty town. This is where the sewage, goes. This is a truck driver's assistant who had been killed, and the police sewed his body up in this sack and left it for his family to to get. But you also have these, mega malls. India is this sort of incredible contrast of, incredibly smart people and modern and technology, but then something like 700 people who are living in poverty. Another story, this really sort of defines how my career has gone, where I'm always paying attention to issues that interest me or areas of the world I want to look at. And so I kind of realized, I'd worked so much in the Middle East that, most Americans didn't realize that, there were a lot of Arabs who were Christian. That might seem simplistic, but anyway, that was the reason I proposed this. Thankfully, they said yes. Now, the Christians of the Middle East are huge. I mean, just the Coptics in Egypt alone deserve a book. So we focused on the Levant, Palestine, Israel, Lebanon, and Syria. So this is in one of the last remaining Christian villages in the West Bank. And because of the pressure from the Israelis as well, and this is even before it's another subject. What's happening now is absolutely horrible and grotesque. But, and then of course, pressure from the Islamicists. These villages are losing their Christian population, so often they're just older folks that are left. This was after a bombing in a children's shoe market in Lahore, Pakistan. 54 people were killed. I was sitting down to have dinner with my fixer, this amazing Pakistani journalist, and his wife made a dinner for us and his two little kids, and we're sitting down, and then our phones just blow up, and there's a bombing across town, and we left to cover it. And then on the plane that night to go home, I wrote this entry of just how surreal it is sometimes. Then in 2013, this terrible civil war has begun in Syria. I've had been to Syria many times. I even spent 2 hours with Bashar al-Assad in 2008 to photograph him for a story for the Geographic, and I decided I wanted to do something about Syria. And so I decided to look at the mental health problems of the Syrian refugees. Of the 5 million or more Syrians who fled, that's not even the internally displaced folks, more than half of them were under 18 years old. So this is a whole generation of Syrians. And I'll tell you, you could be so lucky to have a lot of Syrians come into your community, your country. They will educate their kids. They'll work hard. They will, for the most part, be tremendous contributors. In fact, many of the original workers on Henry Ford's auto plant in Dearborn, Michigan, were from Lebanon and Syria. Sorry. No, it just pisses me off, the ignorance that we are suffering, and look what we have because of that. This is from a story I did in Vietnam. For the last 10 or 15 years, a lot of my work has sort of vectored to what I call solutions journalism or advocacy work, advocacy journalism. And so working a lot with NGOs, foundations, and nonprofits. So I was approached by a foundation, or a nonprofit, in San Francisco that was looking to do a project on Agent Orange. And so I made a film, but I also did a photo essay as well. And then my latest project, which I've worked on for over 10 years, and this work also was just acquired by the Library of Congress earlier this year, was looking at this epidemic of chronic kidney disease around the world. I've now worked in 7 different countries on this issue. This is in Nicaragua, which in many ways was ground zero for it. Tens of thousands of mostly poor agricultural workers have died or gotten sick from this disease. It's underreported, it's diagnosed because there's a stigma. But I've been to India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Peru, and then most recently Qatar and Nepal to look at this issue. And this project now has sort of morphed into a different issue, which is the impact of heat stress on manual laborers around the world. And just to end, so from the time I was a kid, I think I was like 19 years old in London, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I was playing around with like Flash during the day. It was like, wow, that's revolutionary for me. And I made this image, and I was like, whoa. Went back to the darkroom, and I was like, there's something there. And I coined this term for myself called abandoned moments, which means that in the moment I am making the picture, I am out of control. It is not a decisive moment where I've carefully framed it. It's more like in this sort of trance-like state with my environment and the people around me, shooting from the hip, as you would say, not bringing the camera to my eye. So these are just a few examples. This is in Colombia, in India, and this is actually the cover of the book that came out a few years ago. And this is in Beirut. And then just ending with this personal picture of Julie and our kids. This was in a hotel room in London. I think we were on the way to South Africa, but anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Now I'd like to introduce Mike Lyon. Mike Lyon is a pioneering figure in the field of post-digital printmaking. He programs and adapts computer-controlled machinery to create prints, paintings, and other cool stuff in his huge Kansas City studio. Lyon's work is in numerous museums and other public collections. Please join me in welcoming Mike Lyon.
Go for it. I think. This is the one part. Let's see if it works. Yeah. If it doesn't, you better not go far. It is me, computer. Yeah, I don't think we're screen sharing yet. Well, we got something, but we don't have what we want yet.
Yeah, just wait a second, it should pop up.
You think? I don't think so. Let's go down for a sec.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to do the extended display.
Ah,
Now try to start it.
yeah, I think that'll work.
Yeah. And then just give it a sec. There it goes.
Hi, family. Now, this is part of my family. Kids and grandkids. Linda and I have been married 32 years. I should start probably by saying that I was thinking, watching Ed's show, he's been so outward looking his whole life, and we're seeing kind of what he's seen or important moments about the world. And I think what I am going to talk about is more kind of my own inward journey and looking inside and kind of at my interests, which are, I think I'm a process junkie, and interested in how my brain kind of assembles images into something I can understand. Oh, let's see, that's not working. Let's try again. Sorry for just a second. Anything here? Oh, you can see that. There we go. My wife and I play violin in an orchestra in Kansas City and have for a long time. We look like we really play violin in this. But we share a stand in the second violin section, and we're probably the only two orchestra members who smooch before and after performances. I practice, most of my life, I've practiced martial arts and Shotokan karate for more than 40 years. And this is taken in Vancouver against an Israeli guy neither of us had ever met each other before. Like, they put us in the ring and make us fight. I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania in sculpture and the Kansas City Art Institute in painting. And these are some of my paintings and drawings from my student years. And it's kind of constantly devolved from there. After art school, I worked for 15 years or so in order to make enough money to be an artist, which is all I ever wanted to do. I got a couple of patents, one for a sewage treatment method. The other is, this is a computer-controlled order filling system that was used by Tupperware and Discovery Toys and House of Lloyd. And this is a picture of our installation, which is really here in this line. This is my part, and the rest of this is just feeding totes into a high-speed, it's called a split-case order filling system, dropping items into totes at a high rate of speed to fill orders. And I also design furniture and lighting, and this is it's called a fruit monster table that I made for my daughter, a ball bed that's in our house, musical instruments. During the pandemic and after my dad died, my mom had died some years before. Both my mom and dad were very active in the ranch, and really that was my introduction to the ranch in the late 70s, the first time I was here. Anyway, I've made maybe 50-some stringed instruments, a clavichord for my wife. That center picture up here is a guitar commission for a music group. This was in New York playing. An early woodcut, this is when I was 15. I made this actually carved from wood. I don't know, are 15-year-olds allowed to use knives in school these days? But I show this because the work I continue to do is like stamping different things, different times, and making images out of simple things. This is a portrait of my sister from 30-some years ago. A bunch of, you can see the cubes up here set in a light diffuser, like an elevator light diffuser, half-inch cubes, and they've been routed out. I routed them out so that they would print different percentages of their surface in order to make a color image. Some other work from around the same couple of years, a big me made out of little me's, another big me made out of more complicated little me's that were broken up into 25 pieces or so. I got really interested in tile patterns and still am interested in the animation. You can see some of the roughly 128 unique symmetrical patterns you can make out of a tile, a square tile, like just this part right here is a square tile that is on the diagonal half gray and half white. And so in a 4x4 grid, these are all the designs that one can make, and some examples in black of other on the bottom, a semicircle from on the diagonal makes images like those on the bottom, and tablecloths or municipal logos like on the top. Also got into sort of using those tiles or a set of tiles, kind of typesetting to make images like this. I really like that tile. May have to use it again. In 1996, I became obsessed with learning how to make Japanese woodblock prints and Japanese woodblock prints in themselves, and I took a workshop from Hiroki Morinoe, who retired this year, sadly. And I've had several workshops with Hiroki, where maybe 5 weeks total with Hiroki as a student, and then several workshops where he and I taught together, and several workshops here where I taught Japanese technique woodcut. This was my first or second woodblock print, kind of inspired by the Hiroshiges you see on the left. with big primary colors. This is my ex-wife and me living in New York with my libido popping up, I think. And then I started making production woodcuts, carving by hand. These are some of those. And visiting Japan, I was invited to mount a show in 2004, fall of 2004. So it was kind of cool and at a really nice gallery in Kyoto to have a solo show of my Japanese technique woodblock prints, which don't really look Japanese, but they are bijin, sumo, they're Japanese subjects. And these are a kind called aizurie, which means blue printed picture, popular in the 1830s to 1850s. It's part of, I ran out of shoulder and arm and developed a weird kind of dermatitis while I was madly carving that year before the show opened. I printed by hand with a Baren, which is a handheld little circular pad, more than 60,000 impressions by hand, and carved a whole bunch of blocks. I was breaking down and I bought a CNC machine. A do-it-yourself came in a crate, and you put it together and level it, and somehow it worked. And these are big head prints, okubie in Japanese, and this is an okubie of mine, Anthony. And here I am, exhausted after, unattended carving of the 16 blocks, or however you have to add them up. Maybe there's 15 blocks for that print of Anthony. Other roughly 22 by 30 inch woodcuts. Let's see if this will work. In order to print large, like the woodcut on top, like Anthony, I designed and built a table, as hook and like a slot and hook construction, so I could print easily. And I invented this one is pedal controlled. I have a foot pedal underneath, and I push on the foot pedal, and this drawer opens underneath. The top one is the take-up drawer after I print, and then the bottom one, I'm about to close that take-up drawer, step on the pedal, open the bottom drawer, and grab a piece of paper. So I could register the paper on the block from my foot-controlled drawer like that, and then let the drawer slide shut underneath. Sorry, this is a small version of the print. Getting ready to go to Japan, I made little gift prints. The blocks behind are for the gift prints. Those were carved by CNC machine, a very small print that made these little impressions. This is in Kyoto, the opening of the show at Azoshi, and then several famous printmakers, and I don't know who all. A couple of printmakers I knew were there. One, this man, very famous intaglio artist in Japan, who came, ate, drank, and left. I don't think he looked at my work at all. And another guy, where is he? He's in here somewhere, who grabbed my hand and looked at it to see that there were no calluses on my fingers and said, "You're not a printmaker." And I said, "Well, not like you, because that's all he does all day, every day is print." But I said, "No, I'm left-handed, and I do have I had little baby calluses from printing on my left hand." And I was printing on paper by Iwano Ichibe. He's in the lower right here with some of my prints in front of him, and we negotiated for him to make a really large. He's the Japan's living national treasure of printmaking, now in his 90s, retired, and his son has taken over the paper making. But Iwano, that in the upper left of the corner over here is the certification signed by the Emperor of Japan that designates him an important cultural asset. After that show, sort of on vacation, I'd had a lot of ideas using the CNC machine to carve, and I was thinking I could, do my dream of a painting machine, and I made this this gizmo that I could mount where the router went in my machine. I started painting this big sheet. This is about 7 feet long of little experiments in painting watercolors, pressing the brush deeper in and pulling it out. Then I thought, well, I could do it with I could do the same thing with an ink pen. So there's a pen mounted in my machine over here, sort of next to it. And the first attempt at drawing, my idea was kind of like reduction printing, where you print over and over and over to build up value. This is mezzotint, also done by CNC. This was about 4 weeks, this is small, maybe 15 inches wide. And this is the plate that I burnished for 4 weeks, 24/7 by machine until the copper started to flake off. More woodcuts. I wanted to work bigger. In order to print bigger, I had to figure out a better, another way to print, because printing editions by hand at full sheet of plywood size is too much for me. So I designed a stationary bed, print roller press, so the bed doesn't move, but the rollers ride along a track I mounted on the side of all this extruded aluminum. And down here you can see all the parts that I made on my CNC machine, and also some of them are purchased, bearings and so on. This was the second print off of the machine, a reduction woodcut. That was kind of hard because the paper spoils after a few days of being damp. You print damp, you brush waterborne pigment, usually pigment in rice paste. At this time I was still using dry pigment mixed into rice paste, which is an inhalation danger, and I eventually stopped. But here's a 4x8 sheet of plywood with one of the stages of carving and recarving and reprinting for this print. Then one of the nicest prints, this is 42 inches high by 77 inches wide from 17 carved blocks. And my model here, if she's stretched out, is maybe 8 feet tall, but in reality she's like 5'2". That was one of 2 woodcuts that are in museum collections. Unusual for museums to collect anything on paper, much less a woodblock print. And I'm thinking about, I should go back, thinking about the path that the machine takes to carve. You can carve in rasters, like if I define this area and I want to carve, I want to clear some wood out of that, I can carve it by making the router move up and down and then follow in a circle, or I can change the angle of the rasters like this, or I can kind of carve following the contour, and where it pinches off here in the middle, then it can automatically continue. And I was thinking about how to build value in drawing. So with rasters, I didn't think it was very interesting with a screen kind of, but I did think it was interesting piling up rasters to make value, sort of like this bit of a portrait. And I began drawing using my machine. Let's see, can we make this work? Not quite. Sorry, there's a movie here. And, yep, not important, but you can see the pen moving around. Here is this is a life-size drawing of one of my karate students and muses and models, Sarah Oliver, currently a professor of costume design at the University of Michigan. Here she is in a Japanese robe, and you can see the kind of the squiggles. My karate instructor, boy, he looks like a karate instructor, doesn't he? And a close-up again. The sheet of paper is 76 inches high, so big portraits. Another similar sized, 78-inch high. This is a detail of London, a friend of my son's, and I really like rendering hair and stuff like that. Then I thought, well, I could paint. Maybe I could do color painting, and I kind of invented a series of gestures, these diamonds and X's and squares in a couple of different sizes that I could choose by software that I wrote and pile those up. And so I built this airbrush thing. You can see the parts here in the center bottom and an assembled unit here and no ink, otherwise ready to go in my machine and starting to paint colors on top. So it's making paintings like these. This is small, like 43 inches high, a painting, and you can see detail of his, I guess this eye, of his how it's made. I like these, like this little gesture here with a blue and red X. It's not my fault. This was all generated by program to my spec, but I really like giving instructions and seeing what happens. Another thing, this is a pressure pot that extrudes acrylic paint out like a syringe. And a similar device, gravity fed, not as complicated, through a paint pen, kind of like an airbrush without air, to do paintings of my mom and dad and other stuff at that time. So we're up to 2009 here. A big drawing, pen and ink drawing from photos of my model, Jessica. At that time, she brought all of her, like a whole wardrobe, many laundry baskets of clothes and hanging stuff, and we spent the day photographing her and changing clothes and photographing her again, and then kind of made this paper doll thing. But I thought this was novel, which probably isn't. An addition, this was made for the Beach Museum in Manhattan, Kansas, as if there's a beach. It was Mariana Kistler Beach Museum. A woman gave the money for the museum. Anyway, I was commissioned to do a print and had a show of my work at the museum at the same time. So I did an edition of pen and ink drawings, of machine-made pen and ink drawings on a single sheet, 5 by 10 feet long, and then tore them up into individual prints like this. And still kind of worrying about color. This is red and black and white ink. The first one, a detail of a drawing. My friend Miguel Rivera, who's the chair of printmaking at the Kansas City Art Institute, and I am intrigued by his teeth and this abstract mouth and the shapes. This was paper painted with sumi. The white ink had before this just sort of soaked into the paper and wasn't very bright, but the sumi is like strong sizing, and the white ink just stands up. So I wound up, my first pass on this was like a clown face, all white, and so I went back in, kind of changing my conceptual rigidity. I went back in with black ink, and then again with white ink, and then again with black ink until I liked it. And I started trying to realize a more naturalistic color. You can see in the detail this almost fabric-like building up of red, yellow, blue, black, and white ink lines. This is 30 inches high, the sheet. My friend Den, another karate student. And one of my favorites, a portrait of my wife. And you can see how the ink lines build up in her eye. Another portrait. A shot of the software I've written to, this is software to write characters. So I designed a bunch of subroutines. A subroutine from anywhere in a program, you can call a subroutine. It will execute the code and return to wherever you were and continue in the program. It's kind of like saying, go to the grocery store and come back and I'll tell you what to do next. Only going to the grocery store is draw, in this case, this is drawing a quotation mark. So the first 5 or 6 lines draw one of the marks of a quote mark, and the second one draws the other, little rectangles. And in my code, I wrote it so I could draw any character in any size, any place in my drawing space. And then I did it, because my dream was kind of to make the printout of the code that I generated to make a drawing be the drawing. And so this is the beginning of a drawing. As it generates the code, it's following along, reading the code, and executing it on the CNC machine. The code I'm making is the machine code for the native machine code for my CNC machine. And so I made the code that moves the pen that makes the image, the code that moves the pen that makes the image. I wrote the code, the image is mine. And this was collected by the Nelson Atkins Museum, so I was really stoked about that. And here I am with my wife and with Sandy and Christine Kemper, who bought the piece and donated it to the museum, and then the director of the museum. This was in a show called, what was it called? It was a show of important acquisitions of the last 10 years. And over here is a beaded bag that my mom and dad had given to the museum, so it's kind of, I was in good company here. Another drawing of two Kansas City performance artists. These are pretty large too, it's 70 inches or so high, and done in kind of purple and green and black and white, thinking about other ways to build color. Another drawing, and then I'm back on my machine making woodblock prints. If this one will play, let's see, can we make it play? There's really no play button here. I'm sorry, I can't. I don't really get that. Why is that? Let's go back one. Oh, almost had it there. Well, here we can see a drawing underway. This little AxiDraw, a tiny CNC machine with a pen mounted, so it's like a pen plotter. I think they use these to address mailing labels or envelopes or something mostly, but you can use them for drawing. A big drawing, experimental drawing. I wanted to code spirals for some reason. I wanted complete control over everything. And so I started drawing in spirals. Here's a spiral that would produce about a 40% black. So, and you can see I'm counting 1 unit, 1 unit. So then this one would be 2 units, 2 units, 3 units, 3 units, 4. So a really simple way to build a square kind of a spiral. This is my runtime screen that I fill out. These are the parameters to fill out that I can fill in to make a drawing from a reference image, and then how big a drawing I'm going to make over here. How big are the spirals going to be? How far do I step over to the right or down each time? What is the pen width, the pen line width that I need to, all the parameters I need to calculate how many wraps to make in a spiral. God, this is techie stuff. Here's a drawing, blue and yellow over here, red going down over here, finished drawing after the black over here, and you can see all the squiggles of this same guy I painted before. A nice little one, self-portrait. This is maybe 6 inches high, this drawing. Looks great at 9 feet high, with 2 different sizes of spirals that kind of make it a little harder maybe to deconstruct the image when you look at it. And then a series of acrylic paintings on paper of my wife and myself and others. This image really fascinated me because every mark is either vertical or horizontal. Like this, every mark is either vertical or horizontal, like any square spiral. And these diagonal artifacts of process build up, and I mean, even like a little, look at that border with triangles, all accidents of building up spirals. Self-portraits, these are all maybe 40 inches high, some acrylic on canvas paintings, a big painting. Maybe this one will run. Let's see if it will. So I see, it says it's playing, but it's not. Sorry. Well, there's a finished part, and you can see these cool, again, kind of the way the colors pile up is neat. Somewhere in there is a face. This is Koichi Yamamoto, who's taught here too, was playing one of my ukuleles, and he had let me make a kite for his kite project. God, he's very fit. Here's that painting again, done as a woodblock print. And here you can see these spirals. So I'm looking at an image, a picture of my wife, a digital image of my wife. And I'm drawing spirals tighter or looser depending on how light or dark the reference image is at that point. So this one is looking here. This one is looking a little farther to the right. This one is looking down and to the left, and this one is looking down and to the right. And then when they're piled up, they make something like this. And here I'm pulling from my press one of the prints. I had a kind of an epiphany after that, since I had carved away everything but the lines that printed. So I was leaving little thin layers of plywood that broke very easily, chipped off during printing, or even just handling the plywood sheets. And I thought it would be cool to carve the spirals away and print what was left. And it seemed to me that the result would be more luminous in my fantasy. And it is kind of luminous, sort of, and noisy, this image of my wife. Another one, an image of my wife. In this one, the spirals have been doctored so that the beginning of the spiral is a point and the end of the spiral is a point, and in the middle it expands thickness. So a single line would be a semicircle, and a long trail would cut away a line that started thin and got fatter and then got thinner. And it made this interesting pattern that you can see of curves and just unexpected. Experimenting with that idea, you can see just the black block in the background and a color image of my dad, hard to see, and my mom on the 10th anniversary of her death, where she's more ghostly, another woodcut. By the way, I really liked the way the color builds up in these dark areas and this kind of centered, lighter areas. Sorry. I started thinking about lining up the spirals in each block. So here the spirals among a red, a yellow, a blue, and a black block are overlaid exactly so that the white dots are the non-printing centers of where the spiral was carved away. And the image is built backwards, kind of thinking like it cracks my brain at the time, and still kind of to conceive of how to build an image in this complicated way, programmatic way. Here's a self-portrait. This is one of the simplest ones from just 2 blocks. One, a red block where the white spirals, square spirals undoctored, are carved away, and a black block where everything is carved away except the little black lines. And then a finished print. This is 16 inches square, so small. Another print, you can see red, yellow, blue, black plans piled up to make this interesting to me image of my model. And I really like the variation and sort of the scale of what appear to be the marks, even though the marks are the carved away spirals that all get tangled up and overlapped during printing. And instead of squares, I was thinking diamonds would be interesting. So in order to produce those with my software, which only makes squares, I I shifted the image around, kind of rotating it like this, red, yellow, blue, and black images, and then calculated the spirals on those images, and then rotated them down so you can see they make each one is a little different direction. Carving. Oh, I see now it wants to work. So you can see my CNC carving the blocks, and it's a really big area that gets carved very slowly. And here is the print from those 4 blocks, 42 by 77 inches. And I was really proud of my tight registration. And all those white dots are the centers of all 4 spirals. Here, oh, I hope this one will play for us. Come on, you. No. Do it. No, come on, you can do it. Oh gosh, this was, here we go. Oh, we had it for a second. No, come back. Where were we? Come back, come back. Who said that? Well, I'm giving up. In class, those of you, if anyone is here who's in my workshop this week, I'll show you. So these are the prints. These are up in a gallery in Japan right now. Not right now, but at the moment the photo was taken. Another image, this one vertical. You can see the generated spirals on the rotated images. I have optical migraines, or it's called scintillating scotoma, every few days now, which obscure my vision. And I see bright flashing triangles in red, green, yellow, and black that kind of go like that, that start in the center of my eye and just expand and look very much like my prints. A recent print, this one, circles, overlapping circles, quarter circles actually, weighted. Here's as someone was talking about Katsugiwasa's work. This is similar to his a Photoshop bitmap generated lines, kind of like an old woodcut of trees. Most recent big print is this one. There's after printing blue. Here I printed 4 of these. Each one is 2 large sheets, so the finished thing is 77 inches by 82 inches wide. And then here I am pasting 2 halves together. And you can see one of these I put up in the print shop downstairs, so if you're interested, you can see the real thing. It's kind of cool. There they are in my studio with me. Some demo blocks we're going to do showing different ways to produce color images. This is one I made a few days ago for my workshop that shows this is a single block that I can rotate and print repeatedly to make a variety of, kind of pretty images. I like this one a lot. Some authors got interested in my work years ago, so there have been books in which I am a chapter, or my work is a chapter or 2. Post-digital printmaking, as Lindsay said in the introduction, was something I didn't know what it was until Paul Catanese identified me as at first he was calling me a founding father of the post-digital printmaking movement, which is ridiculous, because I don't know what post-digital printmaking is, or I didn't at that time, and I certainly was not the father of a movement, or if there's a movement, I don't know about it. And modern printmaking, April Vollmer's print workshop, a big catalog for the Wichita Art Museum, and that's it. Okay.
All right, thank you so much, Mike. We have time to take a couple questions. We're gonna bring a couple seats up front for you and Ed, but raise your hand if you have a question.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation from you both. I have two separate questions. Oh, hello? Okay, I have two separate questions, one for each of you. For Ed, I'm over here. For Ed, your work is so beautiful. It talks about so many different topics in cultures, important issues in society, cultural issues. My question to you is, when you're taking your photographs, what makes it successful to you? And what is your hope for the photos that you take?
So I guess there's different barometers for what success means. You know, sometimes it's just being able to illuminate an issue, either bring a fresh angle to something that maybe we know about, or uncover something absolutely new. But then more recently, it's about also being a part of making change, like having real impact. So yeah, success could be measured in different ways. Also, just the pure pleasure of making a photograph and the experience that's attached to it.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, success is many different things in a way. And then what was the other part of it?
Just like what do you hope for the photographs that you take?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's to have positive change in the world, really. You know, I mean, I'm not a photographer that's just trying to make beautiful photographs, although it's always great when that happens occasionally. But it's really about it's about visual storytelling for impact.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And my question, sorry, my question for Mike is, what draws you to make prints in portraits? And when you're trying to decide the geometry of a portrait, what interests you, or what draws you when trying to decide what shapes to use for a portrait?
Yeah, that's something I've thought about, of course. So I think I'm drawn to faces, and I think most of us are just, I think we're wired up. That's how, I don't know, I see people walking like a quarter mile away and I can recognize people I know just because of the weird, you know, characteristic of their movement. But mostly we look at our faces and maybe it's when we were babies, maybe nursing at our mother's breast and, you know, looking into her eyes. And if we, I think pretty early we learn the survival technique of not pissing her off. And so expression is, how someone looks is really important. And so I'm, I would say, naturally interested in heads and figures and people. And then so I'm not a photographer, and actually when people ask me what I do lately, I admit I've said artist just to sort of get over it. But almost my whole life I've just said I make stuff. And I like to make stuff, and I'm driven to make stuff, and I am not happy if I'm not making stuff. So I don't know why that is. But I'm interested in how we perceive, how we see. And I don't know, God, it just naturally develops over time, and I get interested in what I did this time, and I try to do, it gave me an idea for something else, and I try that. And I think every day for the last 30 years, more than 30 years, I go into the studio 7 days a week. I work every day. Go into the studio in the morning. I come home in the evening, unless I'm really involved, in which case I don't come home till later. And I only work maybe half days on Sundays. And I do whatever I'm interested in, and those interests sort of go for a long time, and they've been this weird, exploring the kind of patterns and things I can make. God, this is a long answer, sorry. Somewhere in there, maybe is an answer.
Thank you.
What happens if people were not breastfed and they had a bottle? What happens?
No? That's why Coca-Cola is so successful.
Ed, thank you so much for that incredible talk. I had a question about, you hinted a lot about when you got married and had kids, like how that affected your work, but could you talk a little bit more about being away from family and how having a family and raising kids has affected your work?
And how, what was the last part?
And how having a family and raising kids has affected your work, and
Yeah.
Julie's, I guess.
I mean, I personally feel that because I had kids, it sort of expanded my emotional range. But I would not ever say that if someone doesn't have kids, they can't be incredibly empathetic or, have a broad emotional range. I'm just speaking for myself that, it taught me just so many things about, I don't know, like when I would be in a situation where, let's say, someone was sick or dying or their child was in distress, I felt it so deeply because I had more of an understanding of what that might be like if it happened to my child. So I think, having kids and having a committed relationship and all that has developed me. I like to say that by the time I turned 25, I realized if I wanted to be a better photographer, I needed to become a better human being. All right, and that's kind of how I look at it. And so as time has gone on and thankfully my experiential range has broadened culturally on so many levels, that has made me, I just understand things more also. So I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but I just, given that I am a humanistic photographer, and that's what I am interested in is people and issues that affect us as humans, having a family has been really, really beneficial in that way and important. Being away from them is just horrible. I mean, I miss so many things, and thankfully we have a very loving family, and I think my kids love me. No, they love me, but part of that is relationship tip. No, part of that is to listen and to be engaged and to show that you truly care, and that so however obsessive I've been, which has been quite a lot about my work, I've always tried to make sure I'm connected.
Kind of following up on that, I just don't see how you could hold yourself together and not have horrible PTSD. And how do you handle your own mental health, seeing all these awful, awful things?
How candid of an answer can I give?
No, I want you really sincere, like.
Oh my gosh! I mean, first of all,
Have you ever
Julie,
had a breakdown, an actual breakdown?
after going to Iraq a few times in 2004, after I returned, where there were days like we couldn't even leave the hotel, and I'm not a conflict photographer. I've worked a bunch in those zones, but I'm not a war photographer, and I'm a pretty sensitive person actually, and I just remember coming back and I had my first kind of panic attack in Baghdad at 10,000 worship in April of 2004, U.S. Marines went into Fallujah and killed over 400 people. That's when everything changed in that conflict. And I went to that Friday, the Friday prayers at the mother of all mosques. 10,000 angry Muslims came, and I'm this far away from this anger. I wasn't threatened, but I was overwhelmed. So anyway, so the answer to your question is, thankfully having a mate who knows what unconditional love is, having kids that somehow have bared with me and respect me and all that. I mean, in and out of therapy. I've liked weed a lot in the course of my life. I don't know, being a bitch-ass complainer a lot. I just sort of. No, but I mean, it's a real. You know, I consider myself very fortunate, but it's a real process. You know, and there, if I may, there was one time after Julie's dad, after 2 years living with us, he died in our home with us around him. It was amazing, and it was like January of that year, and then a few months later, I was in Beirut interviewing like Iraqi Christians who had left, and like 10 of their family members had been killed. Normally, I would have been crying, and all I could think about is I wanted to go back to my hotel room, and I thought, whoa, have you drained your empathy battery? This is not a good sign. But it's because I had just gone through a very personal, even though it was a beautiful thing, a very personal experience. So it's really hard. Simply, it's hard. And
Yeah, I don't know how you do it. And so many journalists have been killed lately.
yeah.
It's
But
horrible.
the other thing is I get to see the most amazing moments of humanity and beauty and love and people caring for each other and people coming through for each other. So it's this up and down thing, you know, that,
Yep.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ed and Mike, and have a great night.
Thank you. Is this guy amazing?
That was a pleasure.
I figured you'd invent a solution while you're up there, while the videos weren't working.
I tried. I was trying, but what time is it?
Wow. Yes, some of those.